Hi, good evening everyone. This is Brian Mackley. Welcome to the webinar. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes time. We'll allow anyone else who's still logging in the chance to log in and join the webinar. So if you've arrived, if you haven't done so already, feel free to grab a drink, pen and paper, and for now just sit back and relax and we'll get started in a few minutes. So once again, we're just waiting another minute or so for any more people that are still logging in. I can see a few of our guests have joined us, and the rest will be here really soon, I'm sure. So hang tight and we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Okay, we'll get started now. I think everyone is here. So once again, welcome. My name is Brian Mackley and I'm your presenter tonight for this webinar entitled How to Set Boundaries for Teenagers That Work. And just a little bit of housekeeping with the webinar. So just to let you know first up that this webinar is being recorded for future purposes. So if I do speak to anyone or anyone asks a question, I'll only refer to you by your first name. If you've got a headset with a microphone, later on in the webinar you'll have the chance to be unmuted and ask a question, and we can talk back and forth and I'll answer your question hopefully. I'll let you do that as you raise your hand. There should be a little icon on your panel there to the right of the screen next to your name with a little hand. If you click on that, you can raise your hand. I'll see that come up and I can answer your questions. If you don't want to talk, you don't want your voice recorded, or you don't want to be heard over the webinar, that's totally fine. There's also a chat box option on the panel as well, so you can type a question in there and I'll see that. You can type a question in there at any time, but if you could save your questions towards the end of the webinar, that would be great, as there's quite a bit to get through. And so write your questions down on your pen and paper, and I'll endeavour to answer all of those questions towards the end of the webinar. So the webinar itself will go for about an hour, and as you can see it's a PowerPoint slide presentation, so there's several slides to get through, so we'll get underway. Firstly, I just want to welcome you for coming. Thank you for taking time out on your Wednesday evening. I realise there's probably some great TV shows that are on, or some of you may have just finished dinner or have just caught up with the kids and looking to relax after a days of hard work. So I just want to acknowledge you and say thanks for taking the time to invest in yourself and also to invest in your teenagers. I'm assuming that most of you are parents. Some of you may be teachers or youth workers or sports coaches or involved in a teenager's life in some form or another. And however you heard about this webinar, I'm assuming you were sent an email or saw the message on Facebook and registered for the link, so well done on taking that step. Webinars are a great tool. They're certainly the way of the future in terms of presentations, because you can stay in your own house. You don't have to go out. You can hide in your study. You can even be in your pajamas if you want to, and you can listen to all of this and still get the same value and content that you would get at a live presentation. So so again, welcome. And my aim tonight is to present this webinar, and the purpose of it is for you to learn how to create boundaries that work for your team and for you through discussion, planning, and compromise. So some of you may have seen my ebook, How to Set Boundaries for Teenagers at Work. That is available, and I'll give you some details later on how you can get a copy of that, where basically what you see on screen here, creating boundaries through discussion, planning, and compromise, the ebook revolves around all of that. So setting boundaries for teenagers is a tricky thing. Hopefully tonight I'll be able to give you some new ideas and some tips and some strategies on how to do that more effectively, and to also give you maybe a deeper and better understanding of your teenagers. You know, young people today are quite complex and seem to be growing up a lot quicker and starting at an earlier age. And of course you're faced with the challenge of things like social media, the internet, technology, getting between you and your teen, and maybe creating some communication barriers there. So we'll cover communication techniques a little bit, and I'll talk to you about things like adolescent development, how boundaries are good for developing cooperation and responsibility in your teenager, and also I want to talk a little bit about having an open mind as a parent of a teen. I'll just let you know straight up that I'm not a parent of a teenager, but I do work with teenagers, and I've been doing so for about 7 years. So a little bit about me. That's me there. So I'm a qualified youth work practitioner, and I got my qualifications through Chisholm Institute. So essentially I am a youth worker and got my qualifications through that, and have been working as a youth worker for about 7 or 8 years in various different roles. I normally work with teenagers who are quite disengaged and disadvantaged, so they may have left school early, and by early I mean year 7 or 8, sometimes even grade 6. I've worked with young people who haven't even attended high school. Young people who have multiple issues, such as alcohol and drug use, homelessness, mental health problems, domestic violence problems, and some of them go in and out of custodial centres. So I've worked with young people of that sort mainly, but I've also worked with young people who are not at that end of the spectrum, who are also doing really well in life, and also every other young person in between. So I've got a lot of experience there, which I'm really passionate about sharing with you. I'm also a qualified life coach. I got my life coaching qualification about 3 years ago through the Coaching Institute in Melbourne. And when I set out on that journey, I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to use life coaching. But I've found a way to mix life coaching with youth work, and that's now what I do. I consider myself a life coach for youth, or a youth coach. And I'm all about empowering young people, and life coaching is great for that, because life coaching is all about asking effective questions that get young people to really think and make decisions for themselves, and learn how to learn from mistakes and setbacks and set their goals in a really productive way. So I've been doing all of this now for about 8 years experience, here in Australia and also overseas as well. I've worked in the United States. That's where it all started for me. I went and did Camp America when I was about 21 in 2004, and I worked on a summer camp for kids with special needs. And then I really got the passion there, and then came back and got my qualifications in youth work, and went back and did camp a few more times. So working on camps with young people is in my blood. It's something I'm very passionate about as well. And I've run some programs on camps, and as it says in the next point there, also in schools. I've done talks to high school students of up to 250, 300 students on such things as success, failure, mindset, bouncing back from disappointment, and so forth. Various different youth programs. I've worked in residential settings with the most disengaged and at-risk young people in the community. Primarily I've worked in case management role, where I'd have a caseload of up to 12 young people, work with them intensively one-on-one in achieving their goals. And I'm also married, and I have a baby on the way due in July. So that's a little bit about me and my bio, just so you know that I am a real person and a human being. So there you go. Now we'll kind of get underway. Now I'd like to show you a sample of a video that's up on YouTube. It's called How to Set Boundaries for Teenagers That Work. So if you go to YouTube and actually type in How to Set Boundaries for Teenagers That Work, which you can see here, it comes up with this 7-minute video. And this 7-minute video is taken out of the introductory chapter from my ebook, which talks about what young people today are like, and gives you questions on how boundaries work and why they don't work and what you could be doing differently. So if you haven't watched that video yet, I encourage you to check it out. It only goes for about 7.5 minutes, 7 minutes 48 to be exact. At the end of that video, there's details on how you can contact me to get a copy of my ebook. But I'll also be providing you with those details tonight as well, but definitely worth a check if you haven't watched that video. Now, getting into it, boundaries. So what are boundaries and why do teens test them in the first place? So boundaries are essentially rules, conditions, parameters, limits, and I guess procedures, if you'd like to call it, that you put in place for your teenagers to protect them, to keep them safe and secure, to prevent them from harm and risk, and to let them learn that they can't just go wherever they want, whenever they want, that there's limitations, there's boundaries, and that at the end of the day they are there to protect them and to teach them about how to assess risk and be safe in the world. Now, teens love testing the boundaries. And I know you probably set boundaries for your teenager all the time, and sometimes I'll just go against them. Like this young girl in the photo here is sneaking out the window. Teens look for escape when they're frustrated, and they need immediate release. They need to go somewhere where they can be alone or with their friends to get away from whatever it is that's frustrating them. So why do they test boundaries in the first place? Well, they do this for a number of reasons. To gain a sense of freedom. There's a point I'll make now which I will come back to several times during the presentation, is we have to understand that teenagers are young adults in the making. They're no longer children, they're not quite adults, but they're almost there. You know, that physically they're growing and developing, they are becoming adults. Personality is in full swing, starting to take shape, and mentally, emotionally, they are developing the thoughts, the behaviors, the characteristics that they will take with them into their adulthood. So they're beginning to discover that all the limits that we put on them as children don't necessarily exist as much, that they can do more, they can achieve more, they can pass off for older than they actually are, that they can go places, that there's this big world out there, and they just can't wait to get out and explore it. They hate being confined, they don't like to think that they're trapped in any way. They want to explore, they want to take themselves out into the world and find their place. So it's all about freedom, it's about that transition of not quite a child to becoming a young adult. It's a very exciting time for a teenager, and they love their freedom, very important to them. They also test boundaries to get your attention. So teenagers in a way are still children, so they still like attention, and we all do like attention. We don't like to feel like we're being ignored or underappreciated or undervalued. You might be giving your teenager attention, but is it the right kind of attention? They might only get to see you for 5 or 10 minutes a day, and that may not necessarily be your fault. We all live busy lifestyles, and I understand as parents you have a lot on your plate. But how are you spending your time with them? When you are talking to them, what are you talking about? Or when you're maybe disciplining them or giving them a lecture or trying to teach them some kind of a lesson if maybe they did something wrong in school, how are you communicating that? So you might be giving them attention, but it might not be exactly the right attention your teen is looking for. They might just want to connect with you on a more personal level. They may just want to kick back and relax. So have a think about the attention that you are giving them, and is this the attention that they're looking for? Look for the clues and the hints. And if you're unable to give your teen any attention at all, they will go against your will and do things to grab your attention because they want your attention. They want you to love them. They want you to be that. They want you to be there for them and to accept them for who they are. So it is a difficult thing to measure. You know, how much attention is enough or too much or not enough, and how are you giving it? How is your teen interpreting that? Teens also test the boundaries to determine what they can and they can't get away with. So it's all about freedom, and it's all about independence as well, is another major point I refer to quite a lot during this webinar, is that, is that they're trying to find what they can get away with. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about this, just a little technical glitch. Okay, we're back on track. So they're trying to determine what they can and can't get away with. As teens grow up, they realize that they're capable of more, that they can do more. So they start to explore. They want to find out what their own personal limits are based on who they think they are and what they can do. Now, if that sounds a little bit confusing, think of a teen is navigating their life on the cusp of danger and safety. That's why they love risk-taking behavior. There's an element of danger to it, but it's also still controlled and safe as well. So they're trying to figure out what they can get away with when you set a boundary. Because they've got their own boundaries, and if it doesn't match up with yours, then they're going to test your boundaries and compare them to where they are. They also want to feel like they've got power and control. As I've said, they're young adults in the making, so sometimes you'll enter a bit of a power struggle with your teen. And they may go into a bit of a battle with you over who's going to have control over certain things in the relationship and within the house and within the family. If you've got a young teenage daughter, mums and dads, you'll know what that can be like raising them. If there's more than one, they get quite competitive with each other. They'll try to be quite dominant. They'll try to take on a role of leadership within the house, and that is the caring, nurturing mother side in them starting to develop, mixed with all those hormones that are way out of whack. If you have a son, he'll be trying to establish his own sense of power and control and may challenge the dad on this. So dads, if you've got a son who's all of a sudden a lot taller than you, bigger than you, has a deeper voice, maybe more facial hair, he's growing into a young man. So there'll be parts of him there'll be parts of you in him that you need to look out for. Obviously, you're the dad, you're kind of the one who's in charge, as long as he's living in your house. But you don't want to get into a power struggle with your teen. That's really important. Now, teens interpret boundaries very differently than parents do. Obviously, you set boundaries to keep your teenagers safe from harm, and also to protect them, to know where they are, and to nurture them. But teens perceive them in a much different way. They just see them as rules and limits. Rules that stop them from going out and doing what they really want to do, and limits that prevent them from exploring. Excuse me. They also see boundaries as expectations. They might interpret them as your expectations on them, what you want them to be doing, not necessarily what they want to be doing. So they probably think, oh, he's just trying to raise me to be like him. Dad just wants me to go to the same job as him, do the same thing as him in life. So he's putting these boundaries in place so I'll be just like him. But I don't want to be like my dad. That's how teens think. So don't get offended by that, mums and dads. They're just trying to claim their independence. They're still reliant on you. You're still a big part of their life, but they also want to be independent as well. So they will interpret your boundaries as expectations on how you want them to be and grow up. They may also see them as traps or walls. If you're setting boundaries and rules on a regular basis, and maybe not exactly in line with what your teen is doing, if it's too much for boundaries versus too little behavior from the young person, they'll think, okay, what's going on here? They're just trying to stop me from going out there into the world. They also see them as walls. A wall that they can't climb over, they can't go around it, they can't walk through it, obviously, so they tend to just bash their head against it. And they can also see boundaries as a punishment. Punishment is a strong word, and it's got a lot of mixed feelings around it. And sometimes a boundary might be that you're grounding your teenager, and that is, in a sense, punishment. But if it's more like you're telling them they need to be home on a Friday night at 10 o'clock after a night at the movies, and they don't think that's fair, they may think that you're punishing them for no reason. So when teens test the boundaries, they do this to get certain outcomes. They have a need to experiment. So, like I said before, that freedom, that independence, the testing their own limits, they want to see what they can and can't get away with. They're also discovering who they are. You know, the teenage years are a major transition phase in our lives. So the young person is figuring out who they are, what they can achieve, where they fit in, who they want to mix with, how they're going to be viewed, you know, how others are going to perceive them and what they're going to think of them. So it's all very experimental. Risk-taking behavior. Remember, they're on the cusp of safe and dangerous. It's like walking on a tightrope between two tall buildings 100 stories above the ground with no pole to balance them, but there's a little cable holding them, so if they do fall off the tightrope, they'll just dangle. So think of that. That's kind of how a lot of young people are walking their lives. They want to state their independence. You know, they think that they don't need you. They still do need you, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But they're starting to think for themselves. They can take care of themselves. They can get around by themselves. So it's that balance of still needing you, but also wanting to be on their own as well. They're testing themselves to figure out what are the limits of their own limits. And of course they're testing you to see how serious you are about certain things and whether or not you're going to follow through. So that's the outcomes they get from testing your boundaries. So tonight I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of setting boundaries. And this comes from the ebook. There are 7 in total. I'm going to be covering 3 of them tonight. The first one is cooperation and responsibility. So when you're setting boundaries, think of that in relation to developing a sense of responsibility and good cooperative habits within your teenager. There's a positive twist to it, and your teen will start to see this as well. So when you've got your teenager taking on cooperation and responsibility, it can mean a lot of things to them, a lot of positive things. They feel a sense of freedom out of this. And the key point, which I'll say again and again, is that teenagers are adults in the making. So they want to live a life that's free, that's full of possibilities and choices, and they want to be able to make their own decisions. Even though they might shy away from taking on responsibilities around the house sometimes, like cleaning, they actually do want that responsibility and various forms of responsibility. So when you ask them to do something, and give them a clear outcome and a time frame, and then just leave it at that. Set the task, but don't tell them exactly how to do it. They'll have their own way on how to do it, and by allowing them to follow their own process, you're showing that you trust them, and you trust them with the job, and you're empowering them to take on the job and get it done. So this develops their sense of initiative, skills in time management and problem solving, and it gives your teenager the sense of responsibility they love to thrive on. So when you do this, just watch what happens, as your teen will be in the zone, and they'll love the sense of freedom that they get from being entrusted to do something their way, but still with a clear outcome and a result that needs to be met, which you set. So slowly and surely, you can give your teen more responsibility, allowing more trust and space for them to figure out a way to do it, and they'll get that sense of freedom that they really desire. They also get a sense that they can believe that they can make more choices for themselves. So following on from the sense of freedom your teen can feel, they'll start to make more choices for themselves, and they'll start thinking for themselves more. By not overshadowing them or dictating each individual step to them or nagging them on how to do something your way, allow them to work it out for themselves. So they may not get it right the first time or the several first few times. So don't be too hard on them for this. Just acknowledge that they gave it a shot, that they ask, and then ask them questions on how they could do it differently or better. But don't exactly give them the answer, just allow them to work it out for themselves, unless they ask you for the way. So encourage your teen to show you how they're doing it, not tell you how they're doing it. And then just leave them with the task. You know, they will work out a way to do it, and probably quicker than you think. So they'll be resourceful, they'll be crafty, they'll be creative, they'll be industrious to get it done because they want to prove themselves. They want to prove to you that they are capable, intelligent, productive, and young adults. An example of this is you can send your teenager to the supermarket to get ingredients for dinner. Tell them what you're having for dinner and what the ingredients are, and maybe give them a set amount of money that they need to get with that ingredients. They can't leave any ingredients out, they need to get everything, so this will teach them to search for a certain price so they're able to get everything. So they might come back with different ingredients than you've used, but they've stuck to that limit of just using the $20, for example. Excuse me. So if they do that, it's important to acknowledge your teen, and this will motivate them to take on more and more challenges, and also harder challenges as they go. So this will add to their confidence, and it leads them to making more choices for themselves, because they're showing you that they can make mistakes. Oh, sorry, you're showing them that it's okay to make mistakes, and that they can work things out, and then they can learn from those mistakes and improve over time. And then watch what happens then. You'll get a teen who becomes really brave and takes safe, calculated risks and has a go at stuff. This also empowers them to take more action. So once your teen starts to feel confident in making their own choices and becoming independent in their problem-solving skills, they'll feel inclined to be more helpful as much as they can, and then they start to become action takers. It also really boosts their confidence. They'll believe that they can do more, that they've got something to offer. It develops their independence, and it turns them into problem solvers. So the benefits of a cooperative teenager are that the house can be a more peaceful and controlled environment. So running a household with teenagers is hectic enough, I understand that. But when the family is in sync with each other, it makes a world of difference. And this can be achieved through clear lines of communication, allowing all the members of the family their own space, and the family connecting with each other through shared activities and spending time together. So when your teen is in a cooperative mindset due to the previous work on your behalf, they will be less disruptive in the household. So remember that a disruptive teen is looking for attention due to unfulfilled needs or a way to claim their independence or state their unwillingness to comply. It's all about that independence. But if they're getting what they want and you're getting what you want, then harmony is created, and this means the teen will enjoy being at home. They will respect the rules of the house, and this will allow their family members to have their own rights to peace, quiet, space, and a chance to express themselves freely. So you may even find when your teen operates from this place that they will approach you, and they may even ask you if anything needs to be done, because they just want to make themselves useful. So they've seen the benefit in this as it makes you happy, and then they continue to fulfill their sense of responsibility and being relied on within the household. So this also empowers the teen to take more responsibility. So giving them tasks to do and taking them through that process I've just talked about will empower them to want to take on more responsibility. It also develops a selfless teen, and the selfless teen is one who offers to help and won't kick up a fuss. They'll just do it, basically. It also teaches the teen the value of giving and taking equally. And this is probably one of the most important laws in life that we need to learn. Not everybody does, and you can probably think of people you've come across or deal with now in your life somewhere that don't give and take equally. The way of the world is that nothing is for free, and if you truly want something, you've got to work for it. And you're unlikely to be handed everything in life, and if you are, due to maybe wealth, success, or privilege, or access to certain things, you won't be better for it, as you didn't do anything to get that, so you'll have no sense of accomplishment or self-worth. So you've heard stories of filthy rich parents giving their kids everything in life, basically telling them that they never need to work, right? Well, what happens to those kids? Exactly. They become a wreck, more or less. And so teaching your teen that they can get away with, that they can get what they want in life, if they're willing to give the same in return, but doing that first before expecting to be rewarded themselves, is probably one of the most valuable nuggets of wisdom that you can bestow upon your teenager. Your teen understands that they won't get paid for work until they've done that work, right? That's a given, but when it comes to being able to go certain places, meeting certain people, having the nice stuff in life, relaxing, kicking back, it has to be earned. And they will learn this from you. They won't learn it properly by you just telling them, give before you take, and that's it. You have to lead by example, and this is how you influence others the most. You can teach your teen to follow the law of reciprocity, which is give and take equally, by giving examples and actually showing examples. So be an example and remind your teen that hard work does pay off, what goes around comes around, and what you give almost always comes back in return, and sometimes a little bit more. So a teenager who is cooperative and responsible is also influenced to become a team player. So by now your teen is respecting your boundaries, they're following through, they're enjoying the responsibility that comes with that, and they're becoming more cooperative in general, hopefully. Once their confidence levels go through the roof from this, the genuine nature of sharing and caring starts to come out from them. So this leads to a desire to help others and contribute what they know to the community, which is fantastic. We all like to do this on some level. Contribution is one of the 6 core needs of people. According to Anthony Robbins, he talks about the 6 core needs. Contribution is one of them. You may even at one point hear your teen come out and say to you, "I want to help others." And if you hear those words come out of your teenager's mouth, and it sounds real and heartfelt, then you know you've done an amazing job as a parent. If they've awakened that desire within themselves to make a difference in the lives of others, then they will seek out opportunities to do that. And great things in life are achieved by the combined efforts of many. So your teen will seek out some sort of a team or a group in which they can get involved and work towards a common goal. So this could be a sports team of some kind, a youth group, or a volunteering organization, for example. And you really need to encourage your teen with this, and whatever they feel is the right vehicle for them to fulfill their desire to be a team player. Don't be too quick to judge it. Allow them to explore it and try it out, and then check in with them as they're going along and ask if they're getting what they want out of it. If they are, that's great. Encourage them to stick at it, and that will help develop their skills. If it's not the right place or the right situation, let them know that that's okay, and then maybe ask them some questions about why it's not working. So you could ask questions like, was the rest of the team united? Was the coach or leader doing enough for you? Did you get the chance to be heard and seen? Were you getting the chance to use your skills and share your knowledge? So if their answers to these questions are no, then your teen simply wasn't challenged enough. So let them know that it's okay to walk away from that and that they can find something else. So if the call within them to be a team player and to give and contribute and share and experience all that they can from that is really strong, then it needs to be encouraged. And once they're in the zone and your teen has their needs fulfilled, it's very unlikely that they're going to be selfish or greedy or uninspired or uncaring of others, and then real magic starts to happen. So continuing on from teamwork, when you set boundaries to foster a sense of cooperation and responsibility in your teenager, it helps them become team players, and it also helps them establish a particular role or a position. So in relation to teamwork, this is the other component, establishing a role. So it's natural that each of us will intuitively take up a certain role or position in a group or team environment. What this role is will depend on your personality and your values, and your teen might be the loud and the outspoken one who gets everyone's attention. They may be the one who keeps the peace in the group when things get hectic. They may be the diplomatic one who can see everybody's side or opinion and finds a way to mix them together, and that allows the group to reach a mutual decision. Or they could be the one who observes and gets to know what everyone else's role is first. So whichever role it is, it's important, and it's integral to the workings of a productive team. So once your team figures out what role they play in this environment, they'll adopt those characteristics and motivations of the role, and they'll take that with them from group to group and team to team. That's the cap that they wear. So once they've got this level of self-awareness, your team will start to feel confident in new groups and in new situations, and they'll automatically step up to the role they know how to do, and they'll contribute in their own unique way. So this will make them feel worthy, included, and being able to play a pivotal part in every situation that they're in. And this awareness can also help your teen identify possible future career paths for themselves and develop their own level of thinking when they're pushed into situations unexpectedly. When that happens in life, as it does, they'll know what their limits are and their capabilities, their strengths and their weaknesses, because they've established their role within a team, and they'll adapt to those challenges and they'll work it out instead of succumbing to the pressure and just running away from it. So think of boundaries when trying to instill the sense of cooperation and responsibility in your teenager. If you are setting them from a place where the aim of the boundary is to help them develop a sense of responsibility and cooperation, those are just some of the factors that will develop within your teenager. So that's a very positive aspect of setting boundaries for teenagers. Okay, moving along now. I'm just going to grab a drink of water. Okay, the next section I'm going to talk about is adolescent development. So set boundaries, and remember to keep in mind adolescent development. Your teenager is an adolescent, and they're developing at a rapid rate in lots of different ways very quickly and all at once. So this image you can get off the internet basically just sums up what adolescent development is, the four major components of it. Independence, which I've mentioned already. Sexuality, Hormones, relationships, everything comes under that. Body image, what they want to look like, what their image means to them, how they want to be perceived, and their peer relationships. Teenagers' peers are probably the biggest influences on their life outside of the media. Unfortunately, it's not so much parents these days. It's peers, media, and the internet are the major influences on teenagers. Obviously, relationships are still important to them. The way that they communicate in relationships has changed. It's all texting, Facebook, SMS, all that kind of stuff. So that's just a snapshot of adolescent development. Now, there's an iceberg. As you know, the bulk of an iceberg is underneath the water. What's on top is a very small portion of it. So think of this as the human mind. They say we only use about 10% of our mind, which is the conscious part. The rest of the brain is our unconscious part. It's still operating, it still contains information, it's still influencing everything we do on a daily basis. We're just not really aware of it. Then our subconscious is while we sleep, and that's responsible for dreams, but that's a whole other aspect. So teenagers are developing in two different ways through adolescent development, consciously and unconsciously. So consciously, they're experimenting. They do this with their image, they do this through experimenting with drugs and alcohol and risk-taking behavior. They're also making choices on a conscious level. They make choices every day. What will they say? Well, if I say this, am I going to be judged? Am I going to be laughed at? How am I going to speak to that boy? Or how am I going to speak to that girl? What clothes should I wear today? How should I do my hair? Should I do my homework? When should I do my homework? Should I tell my mum or dad the truth? You know, these are the choices they're making on a daily basis, continuously. The conscious mind is running at 1,000 miles a minute. They're also starting to express their voice, verbally and non-verbally. So they're talking to you a lot, especially teenage girls. Teenage boys might not talk as much, might just be like, yeah, don't know, whatever, that kind of thing. But they are communicating to you. They are expressing their voice of who they are. It might be more non-verbally than verbally. So looking at the way they dress, their overall temperament, their body language, they're expressing their voice. They're letting you know who they are, not just by talking, but through their actions, through their interests. Have a look at the posters that are on your teenager's wall. That's a good indication about who they're trying to become and who their role models are, and they're trying to find their voice. Now, unconsciously, they're also going through some changes, which they can't necessarily control, and they're not exactly aware of when they're happening, how they're going to happen, and how often. So emotional development happens on an unconscious level. So your teenager's emotions are in full swing due to their hormones, and hormonal changes are happening unconsciously. All of a sudden they're starting to express feelings for the opposite sex or maybe the same sex. And mood swings, angry, happy, sad, all within a couple of minutes' time. And they're also starting to form their own values and their beliefs and their limitations. So at our core, humans are driven by our values, and we have a value system. We start to form this in our childhood, it develops in our teenage years, and then pretty much it's in place by the time we're adults. So teenagers are starting to question their own values. They're looking at everybody else's values to figure out who they are, where they fit in the world, and what life means. They're also developing their beliefs on an unconscious level, and they're going to act out their beliefs, which ties in with expressing their voice on a verbal and non-verbal level. And limitations. They're developing their own rules and their own limitations for themselves, and that's why they test yours, because they're comparing your rules and limitations to their own. Hormonal changes, like I've already mentioned, and the reason behind why they do things. Teenagers are full of questions. Who am I? Who is this guy? Will he like me? Will she like me? What should I do? Where should I go? Who should I be? What job should I do? Lots and lots of questions. It's all about figuring out who they are, what motivates them, and what drives them. So these are happening on a conscious and unconscious level. So when you're setting boundaries, usually it's going to be in response to the conscious stuff. So maybe you found out that your son drank some beer at a party on the weekend and he's only 16. Maybe you found out he took some drugs. Maybe you found out he jumped in a car with some older guys. You're going to set a boundary in relation to that. But are you thinking about the boundaries you're setting in relation to their emotional and unconscious development? Where are they emotionally right now? Where is your teen? What was the emotional experience your son had as an effect of drinking and getting drunk for the first time? And does your boundary take that into consideration? You know, he may have done it because he was pressured to do it, and he might be actually feeling kind of guilty about it, maybe even a little bit scared because he realized that after he drank a lot, he didn't have as much control. Have you talked to him about that? Think setting boundaries in relation to their values and beliefs. Now, a good way to figure out what a teenager's values are is how they fill their space. So if you look at their bedroom, what are the posters on their wall? If they've got books and movies, what are those books and movies about? What are some of the ornaments they have in their room? How is their room arranged? What are some of the colours in their room? Go in there if you're brave enough and check it out, because that will give you a good indication about what your teen values. And if your boundary conflicts with their highest values, or your boundary threatens to take away their values, that's when you're going to get conflict. That's when you're going to get teens going against you. So figuring out what they want and letting them know, look, you're grounded. I'm going to take that away for a week. Maybe it's one of their favorite books or movies, because you need to learn that if this is what you really appreciate, you've got to behave yourself. If you can do that, then you get it back. If you do that, if it's linked into something your teen really values, I guarantee you they will probably respect what you do just so they can get that back. So have a think about that. And the reason behind why they do things, a good way to understand that is to understand what's the reason behind why you do things. What are your own values? What are your own beliefs and limitations? What motivates you? What drives you? If you can figure that out and you've got a good level of self-awareness around that and you can see it within yourself, you'll be able to see it within your teenager as well. Now, having an open mind. This is a chapter in the book that is probably a favorite of mine, because I work with a lot of parents, a lot of teachers, a lot of youth workers who are parents or have teenage students or clients. And a lot of parents adopt the brick wall approach. It's my way or the highway. This is the way I was raised. This is how it has to be done. No compromise, no discussion. This is how it's going to be done. Do it. And your teen is not going to respond very well to that. In today's world with today's teenagers, you need to have an open mind. When you've got an open mind, this reduces disappointment. So if you've got this sort of standard for your teen, which is really a standard for yourself, which you're expressing through to your teen, trying to pass down to them, and this doesn't match with your teen, who they are, or it doesn't measure up against what they did, but you're sticking by that, and your teen keeps going against it, you're going to experience constant disappointment, and you're going to feel like your teen never listens to you and you're not getting anywhere with them. So what are your standards for your teen, and how does that measure up to them and what they're doing? When you've got an open mind, this can help you prompt effective questioning and get honest answers from your teen. So have an open mind says this: when your teen comes in, you know they've done something bad today. Don't yell at them straight away. Maybe say, look, I know what you did today. We're going to have a chat about that. After dinner, come and see me and we'll have a talk. Okay, so that gives you time to come up with some questions. Gives you also time for your teen to think about what they're going to say and how they're going to say it, and helps them prepare for it as well. So think of some questions. You could say, like, I heard what you did at school today. The teacher rang me. Can you tell me your version of those events? And then listen to what your teen has to say. If it's completely against what the teacher said, say like, what, yours is different from the teacher. Why is it different? So don't say, you're lying because the teacher said this. Say, well, your story's different. I'm just trying to work out what the real story is here. Can you tell me what happened and be honest, please? Okay, so talking to your teen like that may get a more honest answer out of them. Having an open mind also lessens the pressure on you and your teen. So when you've got an open mind, you're willing to compromise. You're willing to be flexible. You're willing to try different things. You're willing to mix things up a little bit. So don't put so much pressure on yourself that you have to discipline your teen every time, that it's got to be the perfect discipline or the perfect boundary, and that it's going to work 100%. Even when you set a boundary really well and you think you've ticked all the boxes, sometimes your teen is still going to pull a fast one on you. They're still going to trick you, and they still may go against you. This is going to happen because it's part of their development. No matter what you do, sometimes they're just going to find a way to outsmart you or get you to change your mind. And that's okay, because you're only human. We're all only human, and we do make mistakes. So put it in place. If it doesn't work, then you can rethink how to set boundaries a different way. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. It also builds a sense of self-awareness within yourself, which then you can pass down to your teenager. When you've got an open mind, thinking about, well, maybe the way I'm communicating needs to change, or maybe the way I'm reacting needs to change. Maybe I should just respond instead of react to what my teenager does. Ask yourself questions about how what they do makes you feel. Ask yourself questions on how you thought you handled it. Ask yourself questions on how you could maybe do it better, who you could talk to for advice. And then that will build up that self-awareness, and then you will be able to manage your responses to what your teen does in a much more calm and controlled way. When you've got an open mind, it opens doors to new opportunities. If you're willing to do things differently, you'll see a different side to your teen. And this might improve communication, this might improve trust, this might improve the respect between your teen and you. Who knows where it'll go? It could go in any direction, and then follow it and see where it takes you. Being open-minded also helps you develop a curious mindset. So not being black and white, not being really rigid and only looking at one solution to everything, but thinking in different terms, thinking in relation to who your teen is, where they're from, what might have influenced their actions in the first place, what you could do differently, what are maybe the environmental factors that are at play, what are some of the past or future events that are influencing this behavior. They're behaving in a certain way because it's a reaction from what's happened in the past, or it's to avoid what they think is going to happen in the future. So have a think about that and get really curious about the behavior of your teenager and what's driving it. And lastly, having an open mind makes you more tolerant to failures and mistakes. Now, your teenagers are going to stuff up a lot. We all do when we're young, even as adults as well. We still make mistakes, and it's okay. No one has to be perfect, especially young people. And making mistakes and being okay with that is how you learn from your mistakes. As long as you do follow through and learn from them, and you want to set this example for your teenager. And having open discussions with them, maybe say, they'll say to you, how was work, Mum? Or how was work, Dad? You could say, I did this today, I made a bit of a mistake, and the boss told me off, and but this is what I did to fix it, and now that won't happen again. So share that with your teen. That's leading by example. Just continuing on from having an open mind. You can do this for yourself, to lead by example in a number of ways. Keep your emotions in check. Remember, don't react, respond. Take time to think about what your teen's done. Try and get yourself together if you can. Sometimes you don't always have the opportunity to do that, but if you do, take some time off. If you're really pissed off about what they've done and you need to get yourself together, maybe go into another room of the house and just compose yourself, take some deep breaths, and make sure you're in a state where you're going to respond in a calm way and not let the emotions run the show, because that's where the arguments start. This is a big one. Try and get rid of some of your baggage. So get rid of those negative and limiting emotions that you're hanging on to, those beliefs that are holding you back and are holding your team back, those perceptions that are really old and might not even be yours. Maybe your parents passed them down to you when you were a teenager 20, 30 years ago, and it doesn't really work anymore. So try and get rid of that baggage, and the way you do that is, well, it's really up to you. You talk to people about it. You can do meditation, you can do yoga, you can get counseling, depending on what your baggage is. You'll know what it is. It's not something you want to carry around with you forever, because you are going to pass that down to your teenagers at some point in life. Do you remember as a teenager you thought, I don't want to be like my mum and dad, I'm going to be completely different? And then as you get older, you realize you start to take on a lot of your parents' personality traits and aspects, because that's hereditary. It's passed down from them to you. I don't know how this happens, it just seems to happen. So if there's an aspect of you don't like, there's something you want to let go of, I really encourage you to do that as soon as you can. And the best way to do that is to be an example. Lead by example for your teenagers. Get out there, do something different, show them that you're brave, show them that you're vulnerable, that you're willing to learn from mistakes, and your teen will be like, wow, Mum, Dad, you're really cool. I didn't know there was this side to you. If your teen thinks you're cool, then you've won. You've done half your job. So develop the unattached and third-person view. And this is a bit of a coaching trick which comes through this aspect called NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which is using the mind to change your perception on past events and reframe your perspective. So think back to maybe a time where you had a fight with your teenager around something. See it from your point of view. Now you can either write it down, what happened, or close your eyes and relive it in your mind. Then see it from your teenager's point of view. And then see it from the point of view of someone watching in on this event. So watching yourself and your teen as if it was maybe a scene on a TV show, or you're outside watching through the window or something. Develop all those views, and then you take into account how you felt, how your teen felt, and how it actually really looked. And this will help you kind of detach from all the personal emotions you've got around that encounter, and then you can actually release that and move on from it and avoid those kind of difficult arguments or confrontations happening in the future. And then, look, just consider multiple possibilities and strategies and just try them all. You know, there's not one way that works on how to set boundaries for teens. No one has all the answers. It's changing all the time as your teen changes, environment changes, technology changes. Just give everything a go, you know, shop until you drop, you know, that's what I say, or try before you buy, and just be willing to have a go at different things. So tonight I've covered a few aspects of my book, How to Set Boundaries for Teenagers at Work. And there's these 4 other sections which I didn't talk about tonight, but these are covered in my book. So I also talk about compromise. So that's being flexible, being willing to try different things, include your teenager in the conversation and the decision making. Communication, a big one. I could probably even write a whole book just on that. But I talk about the communication styles to incorporate when setting boundaries, and how to be aware of your own communication, not just what you're saying, but how you're saying it, how you're delivering it, and also your body language, which actually makes up about 70% of communication. In the book, I also talk about controlling the conversation. So you don't want to say all the words and have your teen say nothing and just follow through. You want to include them in the conversation, but you've got to have an outcome, and your outcome is the boundary you want your teen to respect. And at the end of the day, that governs the whole conversation. So when you've got an outcome, you can control the conversation in a much better way. And then positive reinforcement. So when your teen starts to behave and is respecting your boundaries, reward them for it. And in this chapter of the book, I talk about the benefit of that. And the more you do it, the more your teen will respect the boundaries, and the more often they'll respect the boundaries. So in the book, that's all covered in a bit more detail. So if tonight's been good, you've got a good taste of what this is all about, and you want more information and support, I'll soon be launching a monthly membership program, which includes a few things that will be available for you. I'm only making this monthly membership program available to those who attend these webinars. So if you've signed in tonight, well done. You're going to be eligible to access this really exclusive membership program. It includes a couple of things. It includes access to a blog. So this blog is invite only. This blog address is not shared publicly with anyone. It's only given to those who pay for the membership program. And on this blog I write articles, and I'll be posting them probably twice a week on different aspects of setting boundaries. You'll also receive tips and strategies and ideas from me once a week, and I will send these out to you in an email, sort of like in a newsletter form. And that will be maybe an extension of what's on the blog, but also some different stuff as well. You also have regular email contact with me whenever you want. If you'd like to discuss something that was put on the blog or in the newsletter, you've got a particular question, or maybe you've got a really challenging situation with your teen and you need some kind of one-on-one support, you can email me and I will reply to you usually that day or the next day at the latest. I'm pretty good with replying to emails. So the membership program gives you my email address, my personal email address, which you can contact me on. So you get all of this for only $5 a month. And that works out to be about 16 cents a day. So that's not very much. I mean, when you think about how much you invest in your teens and your children's food, clothing, entertainment, education, toys, everything as they grow up, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So for an extra $5 a month, you can get these exclusive tips and strategies on how you can set boundaries for your teen that they're going to respect and follow, and then you can help raise them in a more nurturing and supportive way. So that will be launching very soon, that membership program, and I'll let you know when that's available. Also coming this year, in about late August or early September, is How to Set Boundaries for Teenagers at Work, the book. So what's available at the moment is an ebook, and it's an introduction. This book is going to go into much more detail, so it includes all the 7 sections, the 3 I talked about tonight, plus those other 4. It also has some stories in there, some questions for you to fill out, some activities that you can do to set boundaries in a more effective way, and it's going to be chock full of really useful information. So for registering for this webinar tonight, I will put you on a mailing list if you like. You just need to email me, and I'll put you on a mailing list, and I'll let you know when that book is ready, and that'll be sort of late August or early September. So if you're interested in the membership, if you want a free copy of the ebook, The Introduction to Set Boundaries, and you want to be kept updated on the progress of the major book that's coming out and when that's available, just send an email to me at info@brianmcaleer.com. So if you email me that, just your name, obviously your email address will be in there. Just let me know what it is you want. If it's just the membership, that's great. If you want a copy of the ebook, I can send that to you too. If you just want to be kept updated, I'll put you on a mailing list. If you would like all of it, let me know, and I will provide all that content for you as well. So just send your name and your details to info@brianmcaleer.com. So I'll just leave that up there for a second so you can write it down. Okay. Now I'd like to just, we're almost done. I'd like to give you this quote before we wrap up. Your choice is to be active or passive in your responses. And that quote is by Deborah Day, who's an American clinical psychologist who works mainly with parents. She works with parents together, both the mum and the dad, husband and wife, on how they can be the best parents that they can be. And I really like this quote because what your teen does or what your child does, you respond to it in some way. You either respond in a passive way, like, ugh, can't wait for him to grow up and get out of this behavior, or you're just like, yeah, whatever, I just can't be bothered with that. So you might be responding in that way, or you might be responding in an active way. And I really encourage you to respond actively rather than passively, because whatever you do, you are responding. You are teaching your teen certain values, certain things about life. You're raising them, you're giving them the meaning of life in your own way. And how are you doing that? Are you doing that in a passive kind of sit back, just sort of roll with the punches kind of way? Or are you actually being active and thinking about it and setting goals and taking action on a daily basis on how you can be the best parent you can be and raise your teenager to be a young, happy, successful, and positive adult in the community? So you want to be active, not passive. And I just really like that quote because that sums it up really well. So, okay, so I'll now open it up to any questions that anybody has. We'll go through questions for a couple minutes or so. And if you would like to speak over the headset on the webinar, just click the raise your hand icon and I will unmute you and we can talk. Otherwise, feel free to just type your question in the chat box. Oh, okay, there's one now in the chat box. This question is from Helen. Helen asks, my husband gives in too easily to my teenage daughter's requests, which destroys the rules that I put in place. Any tips? Okay, this is a common one, where in some family settings, one parent is the disciplinary one, the other one is the fun one. Now, it can switch from parent to parent. It might be the dad dispenses all the rules, and the mum is for fun and like, oh, come here, I'll look after you. Or it could be the other way around. The mum could be the boss who sets all the rules, and the dad's like, do what your mother says, let's go have some fun, sort of thing. And this creates a bit of a divide, and you'll have your teenager viewing one parent as a disciplinary and one as the fun parent who they can manipulate and get everything out of. So, Helen, I would recommend, I'd suggest talking to your husband first and just express that you feel that he gives in a little bit too easily. And maybe coming out straight that way might be a bit confrontational. He might think, oh, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? So you could maybe say, look, I noticed the other day I put this rule in place for our daughter, and she went to you and you said it was okay, and then she ran off and did what I didn't want her to do. Do you think that was the right thing to do? So just asking your husband that question and just being really kind of frank and honest about it. Depending on what his answer is, then you can then cater your answer for that. But I'd start there and just say, well, look, I'm concerned that she uses you and she gets away with certain things. I think we need to be more of a team here. We both need to be coming from the same place, and then that way she'll respect our rules a bit more respectfully. So that's what I would recommend, Helen. So does that answer that question? Yes, great. Excellent. Helen's just typed yes in the chat box. Okay, thank you, Helen. Thank you. Okay, next question is from Peter. Brian, can you give an example of leading by example? Okay, great question. Thanks, Peter. I've talked a little bit about that tonight, about leading by example. And what does that mean? Well, leading is influence, in my opinion. Leading is not dictating or telling somebody what to do. That's management. Leading is like, this is what we need to do, here, let me show you. And then you show your teen how to do it, and you tell them what the outcome is, and you say, you give that a go, I want to see how you go with it. And another example of leading by example is, if there's something, Peter, that you're really passionate about, and maybe you're realizing your teen might not be very passionate at the moment about things. He might just want to be playing video games or sleeping in all the time. There's like not a lot going on. If you want to kind of develop more passion in your teen, you can lead by example. So what are you passionate about? Talk about that with your teen, or show him an example of you being passionate. If, for example, it's maybe a particular topic or subject or something that's going on in the world that kind of ticks you off, that gets under your skin, it might be something that the government's doing, it might be the way that money is distributed, it might be how a certain country is ruling its people, whatever, something kind of big picture that's going on in the world. Talk about that in front of your teen openly. Tell them how you really feel. Say, look, I think that's terrible what's going on over there. In fact, you know what, I think I'm going to maybe start a Facebook page, or I'm going to write a letter to my local council and say, you know, what are you doing about this? And then actually write that letter or start that Facebook page and show your teen, and then send off the letter, and then promote the Facebook page and follow through with it and say, hey, look at what I'm doing, son. You know, I'm really passionate about this. I'm going to get it going. And then don't say to your teen, you should do exactly what I've just done. You're just leading by example. So he'll think, okay, this is how my dad deals with stuff. I'm going to go and explore my passions and what ticks me off, and I'm going to do something about it. So that's leading by example. Not telling someone what to do, but inspiring them to find their own meaning and go and do it with passion. So yeah. Does that answer your question, Peter? Yes, cheers. No worries. Thank you, Peter. Okay. Were there any more questions tonight? No, nothing in the chat box. No one's raising their hand. No. Okay. Alright, well, if it's just those two questions, thank you, Helen, and thank you, Peter, for sharing those questions. I felt they were great questions, and when you do ask a question, you're speaking on behalf of 30% of the people that are in the room. So, Peter and Helen, the challenges that you're having, and the questions you ask are probably stuff that happens for a lot of other parents as well. So, other parents listening in, hopefully you've gotten something out of those questions. If you do have any other questions, feel free to email me once this webinar is finished, and I'll be happy to answer them. So yeah, just a reminder again, if you're interested in the membership program, which is just $5 a month, email me and I'll give you details on when that's ready and up and running. If you'd like a copy of the ebook, I can send that to you, and I'll also give you updates on when the other book is coming as well. So that's pretty much it for tonight. I'd like to say thank you for attending this webinar tonight. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you. I hope you found some value out of tonight and got some benefit from it. This is a subject that I'm really passionate about, that's really close to my heart, and thank you for joining in, and hopefully you've taken something away from this tonight of value that you can maybe apply to your situation at home with your teenager, or maybe that you can share with someone else, another parent that you know who's struggling. Just remember that you're not alone, that there's always help out there, and it is a challenging time raising teenagers. It's not easy. But remember, for teenagers, it's not easy for them as well, being a teenager. So being able to see both sides of that is really important, and just enjoy the journey, because they're not teenagers for long. Before you know it, they're going to be adults in their 20s, and they're going to be moving out. So despite the challenges and the frustrations and the confusing journey that it is, enjoy it and have fun. So thank you very much, and take care. I hope to be hearing from you soon. Bye.